Greetings YouTube, this is Butterfly Effects here with you again.
Oh, good. For a second there I thought it was one of the Beastie Boys.
Today, I want to talk to you about 9/11. Now, if you're the kind of person that doesn't believe that 9/11 was an inside job, you might as well shut this video off right now.
Oh, well that was easy enough. All right. Pack this up. Turn this off.
Because you are no way ready to hear what I'm about to share with you in this video.
9/11 was not an inside job.
If, however, you have acknowledged that 9/11 is an inside job, I have some light to shed on this subject that you may or may not have considered.
The 9/11 attack happened, Vanilla Rice Krispie. Osama Bin Laden took responsibility for it.
The fact that 9/11 was actually a witchcraft ritual.
What? Oh, fuck this.
It was a ceremony with an intention and a purpose. Okay? Most people are probably not aware of that. There are a couple things I need to talk to you about before I can explain the ritual, however.
Yeah, Ice Latte, I think there's a lot of stuff you're gonna have to explain, like, what the fuck are you smoking?
First, you need to understand about ley line intersections, or grids.
Okay, look 50 cents short. Ley lines and city grids are two completely different things.
The cities that we live in are laid out in grids, so to speak. If you take a look at overhead photos, aerial photos of, say, Washington, D.C., you will notice that there are actually pentagrams built naturally into the street.
Okay, White Dynamite, you can superimpose an image on any city you want using monuments or streets or a combination thereof, which the pentagram in Washington, D.C. happens to be. It's not just the streets, and it's not just monuments. It's a combination of monuments and streets, and the streets don't even connect. So here's an example of Washington, D.C.
You can only see really when you're looking at it from overhead.
So what would be the point of that? To only cast spells on people in airplanes going by and birds? What would be the point of having it only by the overview and not at street level?
Now, this does not only occur in Washington, this occurs in all sorts of different places.
Yes, steamed milk. City planning and city commission determine how cities are going to be laid out. Basically, they're based on existing roads in certain areas and areas that are flat as opposed to mountainous ranges. So there's a whole city planning commission that is in charge of laying out cities.
Sometimes it's more underground. But in order to understand these grids, you need to understand ley lines. Okay, now, a ley line is a geomagnetic marker, a geomagnetic epicenter. They're points where the energy kind of converges. And sometimes when these energy pathways converge, even in nature, you will see these naturally occurring circles that will form at a point where there is a ley line intersection.
Ley lines is a term that was coined by an amateur archaeologist, Alfred Winfrid, in 1921 when he was surveying the landscape of Britain, and he noticed that certain monuments were lined up with each other. And these were supposed to be lined up from sunrise to sunset on the solstices. So there was a very specific layout of how ley lines were supposed to be connected.
If you've ever been walking through the woods and you randomly found like a perfect circle of mushrooms, or a perfect circle where the trees just open up in a perfect circle in the middle of a thick forest?
No, Vanilla Killer. That is a circle of mushrooms and an opening in a forest.
That is a ley line intersection. That is a point where these energy lines have intersected. Now, in big, heavy-duty witchcraft ceremonies...
Big, heavy-duty witchcraft ceremonies? What, like they use huge athames and giant candles and gobs of incense and a huge chalice? What exactly is a big, heavy-duty witchcraft ceremony?
Ley lines can be important. In fact, I actually, back in my old witchcraft days, found a ley line intersection, one of these geomagnetic markers, and I actually used to have rituals inside of this circle.
Back in your witchcraft days, what were you, like 12 years old practicing witchcraft? And I don't know what form or what tradition of witchcraft you were supposedly practicing when you were 12 years old, but none of this has anything to do with actual witchcraft that is practiced by people today.
I'd set up a circle within this circle, and I would do my spells on the ley line intersection. It would intensify the power of the ritual.
So, yes, granted, the concept of ley lines, especially after 1969 and 1973, really took hold in the New Age movement. However, ley lines do not really have anything to do with modern day witchcraft practices, where our most important thing is finding places to practice, either other people's homes, our own homes, possibly outdoor rituals in a park that we get a permit for, or maybe rent a building. There is no way that we could intersect ley lines and find some place to practice, because chances are, as you mentioned earlier, monuments and streets, we would probably be in the middle of a road, and how would you be able to do anything in the middle of a road?
And you may or may not have realized this, but the major cities that we live in are all big, gigantic spells.
What? Oh, Vanilla Bean, I gotta hear this.
The elitists, the Masons, Jesuits, Illuminati, whoever it is, doesn't really matter. So many different groups, okay?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. The Shriners, your Triple H Club, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, your local unions, the Illuminati, whatever. Just throw them all in there. It doesn't really matter.
What you got to understand is that when they were settling in these lands, they decided to find these places that had a lot of these ley line intersections. So they would find places where you would find a whole lot of these junctions, these geomagnetic epicenters, and they would build a city right there where there was a lot of them.
So you're saying that city planners built cities on ley lines, which would not be discovered for another 130 years by Alfred Winfred in 1921. So all the cities in America that were built previously, they built them on ley lines, not on topography or underground waterways or already established roads or already established structures or particular areas that are good for building rather than farming. So no, none of this other thing came into account. It's all based upon ley lines that were not discovered for another 130 years. I see.
And they would mark them. And if you actually walk around your city, you'll actually even start to become aware of areas where they've actually left markers to signify where these geomagnetic points actually are in that city. Oftentimes they'll build parks on them because they like to put obelisks over top of them. You know, you ever been inside of a park that has an area where there's like a circle made out of concrete and a obelisk in the center pointing up?
Oh, you clearly have no understanding of urban and civil engineering. They create parks and monuments and layouts of cities for population density, aesthetics. There is actually a lot of thought that goes into planning areas. It's not just arbitrary, it's not based on ley lines, it is based on a lot of complicated factors.
They built that there on purpose. They're marking one of these ley line intersections and then using the obelisk to harness the energy and channel it up for whatever spell or intention it is that they're casting.
Okay, Cream Tea, again, the concept of ley lines was not introduced until 1921 by Alfred Winfrid. And cities are not going to invest money on urban and planning development based upon some imaginary ley lines, which is not even a pseudoscience. It's like a pseudo-science. And not all New Agers, and not all pagans, not all witches even believe in the concept of ley lines. It's a fun little factoid when you try to line up certain monuments like Stonehenge or Glastonbury or whatever. But as for the practicality of it, it begins to break down because you have other things in the way, such as riverbanks, mountains, hills, other structures that are already there. So the whole concept of ley lines is a concept. When you start applying it in the real world, it begins to break down.
And they can, through various sound frequencies and sigil spells and subliminal programming, they can actually control the way you move throughout your city, the thoughts you have, the things that you do. They can manipulate this through these spells, okay?
I could not believe what I had just heard from this plain white rapper. Let's play that again.
And they can, through various sound frequencies and sigil spells and subliminal programming, they can actually control the way you move throughout your city, the thoughts you have, the things that you do. They can manipulate this through these spells, okay?
What? Through sound frequencies, sigil spells, subliminal programming? Is this guy for fucking real? How is this guy allowed to walk around? This guy shouldn't even be flipping burgers at Burger King. He's not qualified for it. This guy needs to go back to school and study his geography, study his history, and definitely study city planning and urban development.
Now, I hope that I've simplified that enough that you're able to understand it.
Oh yeah, I understand. You're fucking nuts.
It can be kind of complicated. Okay, now, places like in Washington, D.C., where they have these pentagrams, okay, where they have the pentagram weaved into the streets there over in Washington, D.C., those are major markers, okay? Now,
here's a map of Washington, D.C. There is no pentagram. You have to force the idea of a pentagram on the District of Columbia in Washington.
You got to understand that places like the Pentagon and the two towers in Washington, D.C. are built on specific points within these ley line maps.
Major markings for what? Your super duper massive spells based upon sound frequencies and sigils and subliminal programming?
Okay? They're built on specific centers so that they can harness the energy for their spell work.
Built on the ley lines that would not have been known in the middle of the 18th century? You mean those?
9/11, those two towers, I believe, were built on or near within one of these epicenters. And I believe that when they built the two towers, they had actually had a plan at some point in the future to tear them down.
So if they were built for spell work, why don't covens in the Washington, D.C. area all practice in the middle of that pentagram?
In the tarot, there's a card that is called the Tower card.
Okay, the Tower card in the tarot? Okay, which deck are you using? You know what? Screw it. I'll just use the most commonly used deck, which is the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. Okay, right off the bat, the Tower is one tower, singular. And not all decks included a tower. For example, the Visconti Savosa deck did not have the tower included in it.
Okay? The Tower card represents your belief structures. The Tower represents your belief structure that you have established.
Okay, when reading tarot cards, you need to have context of other tarot cards next to it and take them into account. The Tower is commonly associated with crisis, destruction, and liberation. Some Belgian decks had a tree instead of a tower. So far, your evidence is shaky, obscure, and not solid at all.
Within your own mind. Could be a belief structure, just a foundation of the way that you live your world. Okay? The Tower represents your belief or your
thoughts, ideas,
your
concepts, imaginings,
your foundation, your stability being challenged, being broken up. In the tarot cards, if you receive this card, it means that you are going through a change in your belief. Your belief process is being broken down in order for you to rebuild it. It can also represent chaos, that your life could end up going from being completely stable to completely chaotic. Okay? Now, look at those two towers like a tower.
There were two towers, not one. Even so, you are just pulling these things together. You're trying to make some sense out of something that doesn't make any sense.
Okay? Now, anybody who's studied enough about Masonic ideology is probably, to some extent, familiar with the dual pillars dichotomy.
Oh no, how deep does this rabbit hole go? Yes, I understand the symbolism. However, these were to represent the two towers that stood in the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. They were not opposites, but rather complementary. One represented foundation, the other one represented strength.
The two pillars. In Freemasonry, they always have the two pillars. The pillar of light and the pillar of darkness, representing the dual polarities. And you'll find also that a lot of the times they kind of do this light and dark routine, like good cop, bad cop.
You're confusing symbolism, you're way off. But regardless, what does this have to do with 9/11, the tarot card, witchcraft, and ley lines?
In a lot of situations. For example, we see in witchcraft, they have the white witches and they have the dark witches.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Anybody who knows the truth knows that there is no such thing as white or dark magic. It's all satanic. But in order to get the people to embrace the magic, they need both the dark side and the light side, because that way they can justify the use of magic to people that are not inclined towards desiring to commit dark deeds.
No, you fucking moron. The whole concept of white witchcraft and black witchcraft is really a misnomer. The whole concept of good and evil comes from Christianity, which is based upon the Zoroastrian principle of the God and the anti-God.
Okay? And we have this dual dichotomy in almost everything. That's, even I find when the devil tries to deceive, he'll do this dual pillar things and he'll represent two sides of an equation.
No, that's pretty much a hang-up from the Zoroastrian God and anti-God, good and evil, light, dark, day, night. Do I have to go on? Do you get the idea?
So, he'll give you two choices, but he's in control of both choices, so both choices are wrong, just like you see with witchcraft.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have hit a new vein of crazy, and our lives will never be the same for it.
He gives you two choices. He gives you light and dark, but they're both evil. They're both a wrong choice.
That doesn't even make any fucking sense. We were talking about opposites, good and evil, dark and light, and now you're saying that they're both evil? I can't do this. He's fucking nuts. I can't. I won't.
And another point you need to understand the ritual that went on with 9/11.
Ritual? What ritual? Oh, no, please don't tell me.
Is the fact that in New Age ideology, they have a goal that they want to reach.
Happiness? Nirvana? Bliss? Understanding? Wisdom? Enlightenment?
They believe that they need to transcend the concept of duality. So the concept of good and evil. In New Age ideology, or Luciferian ideology to be more specific.
What? Wait. What? Wait, which one is it? Is it New Age, Witchcraft, or Luciferian? All three of those things are different things. They are not the same.
The problem inherent in men, according to New Agers, again, this is not what I believe, according to New Agers.
So it's not what you believe, it's what you believe that they believe. So you are just going to build an incredibly obvious straw man before us, and you're not going to try to excuse it or try to cover it up in any way whatsoever. You're just going to outright just say that you're going to build a straw man and then destroy it right in front of us. Okay.
But the biggest problem in our world is our belief in good and evil. That the belief in good and evil just creates division, and that we're all good and we're all evil, and if we're ever going to have peace, we need to transcend this concept of good and evil and transcend and evolve into non-duality.
Okay, where are you going with this?
Okay? So, look at the two towers at 9/11 as these dual pillars, mankind's belief process. And they didn't just hit the two towers, they hit the Pentagon, and they hit very specific points that not only impacted the world on a financial scale or political scale, it didn't just kill people, it didn't just cause financial crisis. There was a bigger picture that was going on a spiritual level when 9/11 occurred that most people are oblivious to.
Look, you're a young kid. I understand your fears, and I understand how difficult it is to understand the events of 9/11 that happened. But you have to understand that trying to give meaning to it and trying to project it on some kind of a boogeyman doesn't really make it any less. It does not help you to understand this inconceivable and horrible event that happened. Nearly 3,000 people died on 9/11 and 6,000 more were injured. It's inconceivable the amount of pain and suffering that was inflicted on humanity that day. But trying to project it onto some kind of a cabal or some Illuminati or some kind of witches isn't going to change the fact that our entire civilization and world was changed that day. So I understand you're a young kid and you have your whole life ahead of you. And it is a horrible thing. But we have to look at reality here. We can't just say it was some kind of a witchcraft spell based upon ley lines and city layouts. It just doesn't work that way.
Okay? And that is the fact that the two pillars, the two towers, okay, represent our belief structures. They represent our concept of good and evil. They represent our internal dual pillars, the two pillars, the good and the evil. 9/11 was a ritual to tear down our belief structure. Symbolically, it partially represented the tearing down of the old structure and the rebuilding of the new. So, our society deteriorating, the old order passing away so that they can bring in their new Luciferian order, as well as our belief process being broken down, being destroyed. Their goal, ritually, was to begin a process that would deteriorate our concepts of good and evil. That it would begin a blurring of the lines. That it would begin a shift in the minds of the people towards embracing a New World Order, towards embracing non-duality, towards embracing evil. That was the goal, and it caused an energetic shift in America and North America that caused a ripple effect, a chain reaction. What happened after 9/11? Don't we all notice a really big increase between 9/11 and 2012? A big increase of people that were flocking towards New Age ideology, towards this transcending of the duality, okay? So, more of society started pushing towards this Luciferian New Age ideology, after 9/11.
Yes, I think people want to find meaning in events that have no meaning. It's just human nature.
9/11 caused a chain reaction that led to this truth movement kind of growing and expanding and then being infiltrated. Okay? It began priming the mind of men to be open to receiving the idea of non-duality, so that the world will gradually grow towards embracing the new order, the new structure that is built in its place. And that's also why they went and replaced the towers.
No, Unslim Shady. They built something in its place because they did not want to have huge holes in the middle of New York City. And they wanted to build a monument to all of the people who died at 9/11.
Okay? So that being said, I think I'm gonna stop there for now. I'm sorry if I bumbled over my words a little bit. It's a little hard to find the right terminology to explain these sorts of things. You know, it's one of those things that it's easier to understand and comprehend than it is to explain.
Yes, so is most delusional thinking.
So I've done my best to explain it to you, and I hope that you understand this. I also want to announce that beginning sometime in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be starting another show during the week that is called The Art of Magic. And within the Art of Magic series, I'm going to be revealing to you things about witchcraft and the occult that impact everybody on a daily basis. I'm going to reveal to you the kinds of magic that the Illuminati uses on everybody daily, such as music, magic, things like the way the cities are laid out, art. I'm going to teach you how they influence your mind so that you can be aware of the tactics of the enemy, so that you will not fall prey to the various forms of manipulation and witchcraft that they use on the masses on a daily basis.
Anyway, this is the end of this video. Thank you so much, and blessed be.